All right, so hello everyone. Welcome to OpenHour. Thanks for joining on. This month we're just gonna chat and loop in about some things that happened at the Barnraising last weekend, or 2 weekends ago, I guess now. And we're going to talk a little bit about some sessions, some carrying those forward. A couple sessions have some great takeaways and next steps, and some more conversations to have. So we're just going to have some space for that in this open hour, and hopefully we'll have a few more people joining on. And that's about it from me. So I guess maybe I'll pass it over to Mate. Do you want to start with, I guess, does anyone else, do we want to, let's loop together some conversation ideas. So we have the game conversation that we definitely wanted to loop in on again. And then what else are we interested in sort of chatting about for recaps or next steps?
I'm happy to talk more about the sulfide monitoring stuff.
The which stuff, Gretchen?
If people are interested in hydrogen sulfide and talking more about those monitoring.
I would like to hear more about that too. I couldn't attend, but that sounded really cool.
Yeah, me too. I just dropped a kid off with Scott Eustace today. Great. Any other sessions we want to check back in on? We can sort of see how things go too.
Because there was I was attending a lot of the hands-on stuff, and that was cool. But I'm wondering how you guys are planning to continue with that, like the microscopes and the antennas. I don't know how that will go, but the microscopes definitely. I'm interested in checking on that, and I wanted to talk to someone because I would like to get some samples of air pollution, and try to visualize them with electron scanning microscope and stuff like that. Because I have access to that, so that would be cool. I would like to make some visual models of that and stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Air samples. Yeah. Just could you say it again? You want some air samples to do analyze?
Yeah. So a couple of times already, Public Lab is doing this air monitoring or air sampling, and trying to develop methods and devices for that. And I would be really just interested in looking like how the particles look like under really good microscope. And I don't know, maybe because I'm further on interested in making models of cancer pathways.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be interesting to use one of these particles as an element that blocks some DNA replication and things like that. So it becomes part of the pathway, and explain it more to people. How does that happen?
Okay, great. So I have, for the people who are just joining on, hi, Mary.
Hi, Stevie.
Hi. And then there's someone else on a Public Lab account. Who's this?
Gilbert.
Hi, Gilbert.
Hey, Gilbert.
How you doing?
Good.
Dobre.
Great. We were just checking in on some of the sessions that happened at Barnraising and looping in at which ones we want to talk about for this open hour in terms of either catching up about them or working on some next steps for them. So far we have the session on games, the session that was on hydrogen sulfide sensing, and the session that was on microscopes and air sampling. Was there any other sessions that we want to loop in on, or or does anyone, I know Mary, you weren't able to come. Is there anything that you're interested in hearing from us who were able to attend?
Yeah, I just had one particular question when it comes to the hydrogen sulfide sensing. I was wondering, how would the presence of sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere affect sensing with that copper plate or whatever you use for hydrogen sulfide?
Okay, great.
And I
Yeah,
just
I
want to
didn't
hear about
realize
everything
that
because I missed
too.
out on it. So
I miss you, Mary. Hello.
hello, I miss you too.
Yeah, I didn't realize that because I cannot see you. Yeah, sorry for interruption. Yeah, let's go.
No worries.
No worries. Hello, Sean. Yes. Sorry, I had to go to a memorial service. So.
Okay, well, we can tack that onto the H2S conversation. Let's start with games, and then let's try to bank on 10 or 15 minutes or so for the game conversation, and then we can move to H2S.
Okay.
Okay, great. Do you want to kick us off, Matej?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, so I would like to create a some sort of group for the games that could be dedicated to. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but I'm just remembering now I'm being a bad facilitator because the people who are joining, like Patrick is joining us in at half an hour.
Okay.
So now I'm thinking now if maybe we should swap them and do H2S. Sorry.
I don't care. It's fine. Totally.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. So we know the people who are thinking about the games will be here when we talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Will there be someone also with microscopes later?
I'm not sure.
No worries.
I haven't heard, but I can talk about that a little bit as well.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Gigi. Do you wanna kick us off on H2S?
Yeah. So at the Barnraising, we talked about two methods that have been in development for a while now in public lab. It was there's a lot of energy around it a few years ago, and we're kind of picking it back up again. And both of these methods are based on the basically the oxidation of a metal. Either copper or silver. And so it basically is that the copper or silver will react with the sulfide in the air to tarnish and create either a copper sulfide or a silver sulfide product. Your question about the sulfur dioxide is great. In sulfur dioxide, the sulfur is at its most oxidized state, and so it wouldn't actually I guess it would it be able to, yeah, it would be able to read. That's a great question. I'm not sure how it would impact the tarnishing, but I think that one of the main questions is how oxygen impacts both of these reactions both with the copper and with the silver. The copper method is basically take elemental copper. Lionel Milberger is a community member who lives in Texas and is pioneering this method. And he uses a copper rod, but then he flattens it. So we got copper sheets because they're already flat to see how those would work. And basically you polish it down to make sure any sort of oil or residue or dirt is removed. And then really just leave it out into the air and watch it change colors. The copper, the oxygen in the air will react with it to form a copper oxide. The first transition where copper loses one electron that the oxygen takes on creates kind of a reddish color. It's a cuprous oxide, and then under further reaction, which happens especially under humid conditions, the copper will lose another electron to the oxygen, and it'll create kind of a blackish substance that's cupric oxide. And this sulfur will also bond with it to make a cupric sulfide. It's unclear if how that kind of like a layer of copper oxide might impact the ability for that copper to react with the sulfide, since oxygen is more electronegative than, this is all a little bit too much chemical detail, but like the oxygen is a little bit more electronegative than sulfur, and so I think that the copper oxide product is more stable, so it might impede that sulfur reaction. But that's kind of one of the main questions is how does how much sulfide can we discern in the atmosphere, and how much does it does the rate of copper oxide formation versus the rate of copper sulfide formation impact what we can see in that tarnish, and can we tell those different kinds of tarnishes apart?
Greg?
Yeah.
Do you think perhaps the reason that they were using copper wire was because of the purity of the copper in the copper wire versus the purity you're going to find in a copper plate? Because really, the more pure the copper wire is, the less resistance it has.
Yeah, absolutely. I got copper sheets that said they were like 99.99% elemental copper. That's my concern with using that copper foil, because I have no idea what the purity of that is, or like, but yeah, that's exactly why Lionel, there's Scott with some copper sheets. But yeah, that's why Lionel used copper rods, or copper pipes, wires. So Scott is showing us a very shiny, beautiful piece of copper that he's probably cut into a strip and sanded down using what I thought was sandpaper, but is really like a polishing thing that I bought online. And then, yes, that. And then poured acetone on the surface to make sure that any oil and residue is removed.
Doesn't the acetone
like being a white, but
doesn't the acetone affects it also?
Huh?
Doesn't the cleaning procedure affect some, like they don't leave residue or anything?
Not acetone, huh?
Oh, cool. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, that's the shiny. And then those are like shower curtain hanging clips. They were super cheap to buy, like a bag of 20. And they seem to be sturdy enough to hold that size. It's maybe an inch thick or an inch wide, 6 inches long, something like that. Little strip there. And that shower curtain hanger seems to be strong enough to hold it. So
I have a question. I think we'll be hoping to get a mini kit together for people to test this stuff out. What are some places where people might find a source of H2S that would be good to test by?
Wetlands have a lot of hydrogen sulfide, especially if they're saltwater wetlands, because there's a lot of sulfate in
rotten eggs.
What?
Rotten eggs.
Yes, anywhere that smells like rotten eggs. But there's a lot of sulfate in seawater, and there are bacteria in the sediment that will reduce that sulfate into hydrogen sulfide. And so anywhere where you're gonna have seawater and like muck that's kind of a thick layer that'll block the oxygen, like you'll find in a lot of wetlands, that's a great place where you can like step into it and have some hydrogen sulfide release. There's also, from that same mechanism where bacteria in sediment reduce the sulfate into hydrogen sulfide, that's actually how hydrogen sulfide becomes in oil as well, because oil is just old organic sediment that's been, compressed and aged millions of years. And so in like near oil and gas well pads, it can be at a dangerous amount. So I feel like wetlands are a little bit safer, but ultimately testing near oil and gas well pads and pipelines.
Sorry, go.
Well, in Louisiana, we have St. Bernard Parish, which is out of attainment for, I feel like it's sulfur dioxide, but it's because the Rain 2 carbon plant produces a lot of hydrogen sulfide.
Mm-hmm.
They're permitted to produce a certain amount, and then they belch out too much often. And they're one of the problems for St. Bernard Parish. There's, I think of the copper. I'm not an air person, I don't work on that too much, but I was introduced to this copper thing from some of my relatives' stories about going into St. Bernard Parish after Katrina, and there was a silver cross, but it turned black, and like for them it was like like their cross turned black, so they got the hell out of Chalmette, just like this is probably bad, right? But also going to hearings about paper mills, and people would come to the hearing on the paper mill with copper components of their air conditioners, just be like, I have to rebuy this copper piece every, 3 months or something because my air conditioner gets eaten by the corrosive stuff. And then also there are people that live up and down the river that they experience that different rotten egg smell, and they get various levels of sick. Oh, also landfills. I think it's like C&D landfills. If there's been a flood and people dump a bunch of drywall all at once in the landfill, it's usually an African-American neighborhood, whether it's one of these temporary landfills after a storm like Harvey or Nate or Katrina, whatever, sometimes it's a temporary thing or it's the long-term landfills. If they're not kept up, they can generate hydrogen sulfide. And so there's lots of opportunities to monitor hydrogen sulfide on the Gulf Coast, I think.
So basically also paper factories produce that?
Yeah. Oh, also methanol plants that produce methanol from natural gas. They're just, it's in their permit, and then people, I was struck, there's lots of stuff coming out of the paper mill, but I
just remember there was one paper mill in Slovakia in one town, and it just smelled like rotten eggs, like hardcore all the time around there. Like to pass in a car around there was always really bad. Yeah.
We had a pulping mill in a town called Tacoma near where I grew up, and we always called it the aroma of Tacoma. It smells terrible. Yep. It's some sort of sulfidizing process. Like it's actually not like in the. It's somehow how they like produce. Yeah. I don't know exactly, but it's like you could produce paper without it. It's just cheaper to do it. I have no idea what the process is. But.
There's also a lot of sulfur that comes from, if you're still doing work in Chicago, I haven't kept up with that, but the coke ovens there, they're awful. Absolutely awful for producing it. Because I remember when we lived there, I got a silver candlesticks as a wedding present, and we couldn't leave them out. They just turned black. We had to seal them in plastic containers, going back to what Scott said. And there's lots of paper mills up here in Wisconsin, a whole lot, which also have mercury pollution problems. So And then CAFOs produce a lot of hydrogen sulfide. So
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot about that lately. I think Leslie was here for Barnraising as well, and she is heading to a Farm and Factory Summit conference next month, and they are really I happened to meet one of the people who's putting it on and recently, and they're really interested in H2S stuff too.
yeah, it's like doing brain damage to kids and stuff. It's bad.
I want to ask, what's the limitation of the test? I used to do a viscose industry investigation this year in China, and we test H2S, but using the test kit I bought on Taobao. But the limitation is because Chinese standard is 0.06 mg per milligram. So yeah, milligram per square meter. So yeah, I don't know, using this method, can we test the hydrogen sulfide this low?
We don't know yet. That's one of the big questions with this method is we don't know the limit of detection or the influence of like oxygen or sulfur dioxide. And same is true of the other method, and the one that Scott just posted in the chat, a really quite stylish picture of the testing with the photo paper, which is
younger.
Which is a silver halide photo paper where the sulfide will react with that silver, replace the halide, and make a silver sulfide compound that's also kind of a brownish color. But that also, the question there again is, what's the influence of oxygen? Because oxygen will do the same reaction. I mean, oxygen and sulfide are going to react really similarly because they're just oxygen's right above sulfur in the periodic table. So their chemistry is really pretty similar, except that sulfide has a larger range of electronic behavior, basically like donating and accepting electrons, but otherwise they behave really similarly. So the question is like, what's the influence of oxygen? And then also with that, like with both of these, the copper method and the silver halide method, what are the limits of detection? We don't know. So right now they're both qualitative measures.
Gretchen, is this silver halide, is that different than the like nice silver gel prints they used for black and white photography?
I honestly have no idea. Scott, do you know?
No, can you repeat the question?
The best black and white photography used to be silver gel prints, and now I forget whether it was oxidized or sulfide, but I mean it was a light reaction to it.
Right.
It sounds like a similar compound. Oh golly. Anyways,
I think it's a Sarah Wiley question. I know when we were planting strips out in the marsh, wanted to make sure that no light, and I think it's the same with these newer canisters. You don't want light to hit them.
yeah, okay.
So I want to, I think that we'll hopefully have more time to talk H2S, maybe even at another open hour on its own coming up, especially if we're talking about getting some of these exploratory kits out there. But anyway, great questions. I kept track of everyone's question except Mary. I missed your first question because I was going to post them up on Public Lab. So if you want to remember what that was and post it up on Public Lab, we can start building some information around these exploratory kit ideas. but I wanted to switch over a little bit to the games conversation, if that's okay. Or does anyone have any last follow-up comments or questions for the H2S session?
Oh, yeah. I see Sean posted what looks like Draeger tubes that we use in the United States on the chat. So that might be of interest. With the issue we've had with the Draeger tubes is getting the correct volume of air through the tube in with a cheap instrument. The tubes themselves are fairly cheap, but getting the correct amount of air through them is somewhat of a challenge, I guess.
Oh, we should talk more about that maybe in an open call soon. Because the Kitagawa tubes that we were using for formaldehyde, Matthew found a pretty good method for calibrating the airflow using an aquarium pump where you did this too, Dan, where you reverse the diaphragm so it sucks instead of pushes air, and he calibrated it using some just using bubbles, but it seemed like it got pretty well. So and it's the same, like the Kitagawa tubes are the exact same as the Draeger tubes, so I wonder if that would work.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's real hard to do, but it's not a real easy process. I don't think we really have it all worked out. Is kind of where I was going with that. But yeah, there is a cheaper method of doing it. Yes.
Good to know.
All right. Lots more to catch up on in H2S. Okay, let's shuffle over to the games conversation. I see Patrick's joined. Hi, Patrick.
Hello. Hello, Stevie. Hello, everybody.
Matei, you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm very happy that we're going with this forward. I hope it will be a lot of fun. And so first, I mean, I think we should, towards the games, we should discuss how to go forward. I was thinking that we should probably create some sort of group for that. Or I was kind of struggling with figuring out actually, like, what should we do, like a Google group, or like, how do you actually physically create a group on a public lab website? Is that even possible, or should we just do research nodes and a tag, or how does that work? So first of all,
That's such a good question, Matei.
Like this, I'm sorry, I sound like a real amateur right now.
No, there's two different systems going on right now. No, it's totally fine. There's two different systems because since we started in the early days, Google Groups has now become a largely unstaffed project of Google. So we're in a process in the next, hopefully in 2018, we're actually going to be migrating all of the existing Google Groups onto the website as subscriptions to topics like tags begins to work better. And also mostly built is also the rich profiles, the ability to tag, that anyone can tag themselves as being part of a group and then that group existing. But I would say, just so you guys can get started, create a Google group, use the naming format, either plots dash or public lab dash, whatever. And just keep in mind that we're going to be and make me or Stevie another owner of the group. And just keep in mind that over the next year, as we can support you better on the website, we'll just move everyone over.
That's great. So I will do that. I will do public lab dash games Google group. And Stevie owner, perfect. By the way, I'm taking notes into the same notepad we did during the. Just to let you know. Well, anyways, so yeah.
Sorry, Matei,
I was just thinking. Sorry?
You cut out there, or maybe that was just me. Where are you taking notes?
Oh, okay. So I'm taking notes into the old notepad we were using during Barnraising for games.
Okay.
Just FYI. Okay, so I think that we should kind of just figure out like where to start first. I think that there is a lot of possibilities. So the thing we maybe decide just like where to start, and I would say that maybe we should start with something smaller and simple beginnings and see how it goes. I would have suggestion maybe for for uh, for the good what is it, the good, bad, and the muddy uh, because that seemed like a good structure for a game. Like it could be sort of easy and interesting to create a game about it, like how to explain like the relationship between the sediment in those two places where like one place it creates it creates a good environment, good stuff we wanted, the other one it doesn't. So like somehow the leveling of that thing, like this could be one of the quite fruitful and maybe easier things to do, and then we could maybe go from there. But also there are different options we can use, because if we think in general about the games, so I mean interesting would be maybe to at some point try to use some data from public lab and involve those data actually in a game.
Can you explain the premise of the good, the bad, the muddy game?
Sure. So if just in general, and I think I should actually make a research note about this, because which will contain all of the information we put on the notepad during the game session, because so that there is a link to the presentation we saw last time at the Barnraising, and that was like Scott presented it, and that was pretty explanatory, self-explanatory, I think. But yeah, the premise is that, and maybe Scott will be better in this, but so Mississippi River is in normal conditions, as I understand that, is bringing the sediment, is heavily sedimented river because it drags all the sediment from like 3/4 of United States and transport it into the ocean, into the bay, and so for some reason, I'm not sure why is that happening, but for some reason people are creating canals in the Mississippi bends, and those canals are stealing the sand and the sediment, sorry, not the sand, but the sediment out of the river. So and this creates like two problems. One is in the delta of the river, that the river doesn't create any more salt marsh and any more land for the salt marsh, and salt marsh protects the land from storms and all of that. So basically, even if there are towns or something behind that, so this serves as a protective barrier and also habitat for different organisms. And in the land, like inland, when people redirect the sediment, so it creates sort of the sediments kind of layers up in the places where normally there is like water or like I don't know how to say this in English, sorry. There's like lakes, not lakes, what is it, like well anyways, like it pushes away the water where the water was there before, or the wet land inside inland, And so then, there is no fish anymore. There is not even water anymore. People cannot fish there. It completely redesigns the landscape. So, yeah, that's how I understand. So the fishermen are happy about it, but also, like, it just totally, like, on large scale changes the habitats. So the game question is like, how could we create a game about, like, how do you balance this ecosystem, or how, there's a lot of possibilities with, like, trading the sand, or like you create two different areas or two different maps which can exchange something with each other, and your goal can be to keep the balance or like that. Like, this is open to figure out, actually. But yeah, this could be the first game that could be pretty predictable, actually. And then we can go, into so the main point of the games is actually that there could be like 2 or 3 main purposes for the games, right? And so I would just to start thinking about the games from, like, wider perspective, like what is its purpose in public lab, and then get to narrower, more particular examples. So first of all, in general, it could be something that helps us to explain some issues that public lab is dealing with to the public. Or we can create some sort of blueprints for games that certain communities can use to explain their issues. Because the game is really kind of great for explaining stuff and getting people really hands-on involved with particular issues. Second,
Mete, can I ask a question?
yes.
I got really excited how you had like an ecosystem management game.
Yes.
But since everything's connected, how do you determine boundaries when you make games?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would probably Scott could help in this case. And like, if we are speaking about this particular game about the good, bad, and the muddy, the Mississippi, so the boundaries will be pretty clearly actually defined by the by the area that the river influences, right? I would
Which is
start
not
there.
small.
The watershed.
Yeah, the watershed, exactly, that's the word. Sorry.
Okay.
So that is not small, but then we can, like, pick certain areas that are in trouble and just use those, basically, because the trouble is basically down the stream more than upstream, I would say, right? Like, there are different things happening upstream and downstream.
I'm glad you think this is so simple, because
Well,
somewhat successful in communicating it. I've been trying and trying and trying. But yeah, I see a couple of things. You have a distributary network of rivers, right? We have all this sediment and water coming in from all over, but the important arena for the game would be the distributaries, right? It's the opposite of the tributary system.
Yeah.
Right? We have the river is the source of the land at that point, which is kind of like from Natchez south, kind of. So, but you have a channel network, and because of the shape of the channel network, the sediment is going in certain places and not in other places.
So where would you? Where
you have a limited quantity, though, which is sediment, right? Mm-hmm. And you want it in some places, and you don't want it in other places, and it's based on the shape of the channels.
So you can basically have a map, which will be, like, quote unquote cut off at certain point, that we can say that the sediment doesn't really produces the land anymore above certain, like, height or something towards the north, probably, right? or upstream basically. There is some there could be some cutoff line for us just to like determine what will be our playing area on the map. So we can like place there like a cutoff line for us that, okay, so above this, that doesn't make sense. There could be just something that produces the sediment and like virtual.
Watersheds are so large areas. One possibility you might consider in terms of a microcosm would be the estuaries. And the Estuarine Society has a lot of data specific to those areas. And as you describe, salinity is a key feature, and it's exactly in those estuaries where there is the primary breeding ground for crustacean, mollusca, and certain other fish species. So if you look at a subset of your watershed as being the estuaries, you might be able to go into much greater detail than you would be able to for the entire watershed itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. I think what I thought was the point of the game, though, was kind of at a more zoomed out scale.
Yeah.
Because we have this whole, I mean, what is the estuary, right? If I'm saying it's from Natchez to the Gulf, that's, you know what I mean? That's a large area. But that's how it is in Louisiana. And I think we wanted to get at the contrast between the places we desperately need sediment, which is Plaquemines Parish, and the places where sediment is a problem, which is St. Martin Parish, like much more upriver. And it's entirely based, I mean, the system was, we had a natural system, but you kind of replumbed it for the sake of shipping on the Mississippi River. So now too much sediment goes into the Atchafalaya and doesn't go into the Mississippi River. If you did some reconfiguring, you know, you could have more sediment in the Mississippi River, and it could build land in Plaquemines Parish and not fill wetlands in St. Martin Parish.
I understand what you're referring to, but I guess I saw it from his description as being two related primary functions. One related to sedimentology, and the other one related to fisheries development, and the potential. And so that one could, they're certainly interrelated, but on the other hand, one could go into much greater detail looking at those connectivities between freshwater and saltwater from a point of view of fisheries development. And then you can have yet another sequence that looks at the entire sedimentology level, which is a much greater and long-term problem as far as land development or land subsidence or you know, saltwater intrusion. I mean, these are interrelated things, but I think it's something that could be dealt with in a parallel setting within games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, definitely we could, you know, because this is not like we will figure out the game one time, one session. So I would definitely suggest that we can do it in steps, and so we could like kind of first zoom out, figure out what would be the easiest first step to start, and then build on that and expand on that. Like we could add different layers to it and all of this stuff. But first we should, I think, create a basic kind of structure for that, which should be rather simpler and open to additions.
So that in version 4 you add like stakeholders, where you're like landowners and oystermen and like government officials.
It gets complicated however you want. But we should go gradually from simpler to more complicated, because I don't think otherwise we will be able to figure anything out if we just like start complicated first.
Then your funding gets cut.
Exactly. Then someone will start drilling somewhere again and all that stuff. Yeah.
So you can do it in a scalable kind of way?
Yes.
Okay.
Like that it will be, opened to later editions. kind of like a snowball effect, basically. So we
Like you
just
buy the add-ons.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, yeah, we should just start a. I don't know if, like, that's the question. I don't know if this should be a research node or a different kind of or a Google group, or like definitely Google group should exist, but we should have some sort of like, firmer point where we can see the maps and like all of that kind of gathered in one place.
If you pick your keyword,
Mm-hmm.
and I leave it to you guys to say whether the games group wants to always use the games tag and then also use a project name like
Muddy.
like Muddy Mississippi, or like some project name. And if you guys get those tags on there, other people working on the website can help pull, whether it's a research note, whether it ends up being something on MapKnitter, the Google group you start, we can kind of get it to all like land together on one page for you guys.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great, and of course, whoever has ideas for other games, so it will be great if people use some like these tags or something, and yeah.
But hey, I've been one thing that we've been sort of floating around lately is the idea of project landing pages. And there's I just dropped in the notes. If you hit the chat here, there's a link to some of the wiki templates, and there's one on there called project page, and you can click the link to make one. It's like kind of an intense page because it's like sort of assumes that you've already gotten a little bit involved already. So it's like it assumes that you already need to curate some information. So maybe, you wouldn't be there yet, but if you start with just writing a research note about it, creating your tag, then eventually if you end up with a good bit of material, it might be a way to sort of help organize that and say, hey, we're chatting here, these are the updates kind of things. So if that's something that an you could wrap your head around organizing that kind of way, an option.
That sounds great, and I was just like, I totally started talking about Scott's project, but like, are people even interested in this project or something else, or like what do you guys think? Like, would this be interesting, or for you personally, or for I mean, I just think it's pretty simple. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm still using the word simple, and I know, but like for a game, it could be pretty like semi straightforward, actually, like to create a game out of this. I believe, even though the issue is complicated and it's like laid out in like multiple steps, but yeah. Anyways, do you guys like this idea at all, or?
Yes, it sounds fun. Boy, I can think of all kinds of games.
Yeah. but this could be a good beginning, right?
Oh, that could be great.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. And, I was thinking also that we can like definitely, I have to think more about this, but there's so many possibilities. There are even like some possibilities for making some like simple digital games with like other issues or involving data, like with digital games, but also non-digital, like board games, or like personally, like games involving people or certain procedures. Like that, there's a bunch of stuff we can make together, and then maybe next Barnraising we can try to play at least one of them for a little bit or two. That could be fun, like a kind of play test that. And Yeah, but I mean, there's just so much possibilities. We have to figure. We kind of can decide for which one. And also, I was thinking, like for example, at our school here, there's a lot of undergraduates just trying to develop indie games and stuff. So I mean, I could even because I'm a TA, I could give them an assignment for like some very simple online games involving public life issues and stuff. So that could be also interesting, just for fun.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe we have the potential to because Tony and we actually live at Delta area. It's Pure River Delta. We have different problems as Gulf Coast, but yeah, it would be cool to open source the game that we can adapt into like local problems and it's playable at different regions.
Yeah, definitely. And then there is this whole another aspect of like, how do you collect data? That could be also a game for just from a different point of view. So these are all the different various possibilities, and we just have to kind of figure out where to start. And Patrick, you had also some idea for the barn raising game.
Yeah. Hey. So hey everybody, this was definitely a idea just for fun, not to do anything useful or environmental at all. But my idea for a game was you're a participant at the barn raising, and you're trying to walk around and go to different sessions and like have conversations and come back with like the best barn raising experience, which is going to come down to like how much knowledge you take away from it and like how you manage your energy throughout. So I posted a research note about that. I think that it would be fun to play a game about the barn raising at the barn raising, but that's just the kind of thing that makes me think that's really fun. So just putting that out there.
Yeah, I thought it could be like a little bit too much for people attending the barn raising as I wrote that time, but there could be definitely some sort of a game involved in barn raising. But I'm kind of struggling with like keeping up with so much information and all of this. I don't know if like a game would be like even almost too much for myself to
anxiety inducing.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I'm now getting bad points. I missed my session.
Patrick, you self-declared some serious FOMO. Is that like the basis of this game?
Oh yes, yeah. I was having so much FOMO during barn raising. To me, like making a game about it was like a way of dealing with it. Like, oh, we're gonna miss out on some of the sessions. Here's a game where like you can't go to every session and you kind of get to do the barn raising again. So yeah.
No, but yeah, I would definitely say that there should be maybe within the Funcom or something there could be really a game we can play together, and there could be maybe like a characteristic game that we play only during barn raising, and that could be fun that people could actually look forward to, like one evening or something.
And maybe the game can be the barn raising culture that continues somehow even when a barn raising isn't happening. And there's a lot of, like the work we do to get ready to present a session or host a session, lead a discussion.
Yeah.
That kind of roundup is something that topic areas regularly need. See what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So a game about getting ready for barn raising.
Or summarizing afterwards.
So great.
A game where you have great documentation of your session so that people experience less fear of missing out because they can read the research note. What happened? Did you like?
Yeah, that could be cool. Also complicated and challenging, but it would be fun if this would work out. Definitely, that would be great. This is harder one than to explain the Mississippi River, I would say. But yes, I agree.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, wasn't that a neat back and forth when Matei and with Gilbert and Matei and Scott and everybody talking about the inhabiting the Mississippi Delta region, and then Sean speaks up from the Pearl River Delta, and I don't know, it's just this is kind of great. I mean, you know, these are two major deltas, and I feel like river issues and land cover issues aren't getting the kind of science communication coverage that, say, sea level rises or like other kinds of climate change are, because the issues are more complex. And so, I don't know, I was just appreciating it, and if there's anything I can do to support, we figure out what the next step is, you know, it's very interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm really into like these river issues seems like, to me, the way to go in like right now, and people are interested in it. So yeah, why not? Let's do it. Let's do it as a first thing, and then we can like spring off of that and, you know, like go wild. But like we have, this will be a great beginning, I would say.
Definitely. Cool.
You can count on me to help play test it and stuff like that. If that's what the role of the games group can be, it's like we'll work on a game together, play test it. I'm in for that.
Yeah, play testing is the best.
Well,
cool. And also we could involve some, you know, public lab tools to maybe create the map. Like why not to balloon map or kite map certain areas and then use them as the playing board or something like that. Like that could be really cool and involving again. So, that's for later again. But you know, the public lab has a lot of tools that could be used to create like the games. Actually, the maps.
Yeah, Scott could do a map knitter for the watershed.
Yeah. Run around the whole watershed for like 3 years.
And then we can start, you know, it could be the public lab metaverse, where all the environmental sensor data and all the map data, you know, create a virtual world.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome, and a little bit creepy too, because it will be polluted world. But yes. But yeah, that would be perfect. That would be so awesome to actually have a metaverse somewhere, hosted on public lab servers, metaverse of fighting against ecological pollution.
It becomes very similar to real life.
It is. Is it alive? Is it a game?
Well, to talk about distributed data storage, if you like that kind of thing, tune in tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. East Coast to OpenCall. We've got some folks coming in from the Data Together group to speak directly to our community science audience, to say, like, knowing that we're a community that collects data and we want to actually host it and back it up amongst each other, so that we're not relying on free services by, you know, third parties who don't have the same data justice standards that we do. Anyways, that's tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern.
Cool.
We have hit the hour, the open hour. Leave the line open. We didn't do the microscope thing, but I did find this awesome research note. I'm going to put it up. If nobody's seen it yet, or if you haven't seen it yet, it's Katie's post from Prototyping at Barnraising, which was pretty cool. Did anyone else have anything we should keep the line open for? Otherwise, thanks so much for coming, everyone. It's so good to see you again. I'm sad about, Barnraising.
Oh.
Wait, everyone do it. I'm going to screenshot.
All right.
Yeah, that's all you
Good. Got it. That's so cute.
That's nice. Cool.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Nice. So I'm gonna create all the groups and stuff and let you know, guys. Thank you.
Cool. Let us know if we can help. How?
Thanks, moderator.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Oh, Stevie?
Yeah.
Oh, there. Sorry. I was just wondering. Can we save the chat?
You caught me copying it. That's what I'm doing right now.
Okay, cool. And,
yeah, I'll put it up on the archive on OpenHour archive. But can you put the link in for the games page that you're keeping notes on?
Right now, and I'm just. Oh, here is the chat. Okay, cool.
Okay, got it. All right, I got everything.
And I took some notes also right now, but just a little bit. So.
Okay, yeah, cool. I'll put this up on the OpenHour archive, and you can edit that page and add anything you want.
And I will make a research note this week sometime. Not sure when exactly, but.
Thanks, Ate. Thanks for taking that on to run the combo. I think it's gonna be really cool.
It's a lot of fun, and that's what I do, so that's good.
All right. Well, I'll chat with you soon.
Cool. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.